Hello and welcome to Eco Girl in a Modern World. This channel is dedicated to posting content that talks about the uh, the um, the struggles of trying to live in a modern modern world with modern conveniences, but to still be environmentally friendly. Today's video is actually going to be one that I've been really eager to do. I swear I've had like a fire under me to do this video, and it's really based on my last video about bedding. When we went through the bedding video, I talked a little bit about the type of fillers that you can use for duvet comforters, and one of the fillers that we talked about was down. And down has a lot of complex kind of background to it, and I wanted to do a separate video because I've actually done some research on it. I even said in the bedding video that I was going to research something a little bit, you know, to learn more about the background of this fiber, this resource, and I learned a whole lot. So I thought this would be a great time if you're watching this at the time the video posts. It's right around Thanksgiving, so have your turkey feast if you celebrate, or if you're a vegan, good for you. But if you celebrate, you know, blessed be for that, and go ahead and enjoy your meal, and then we'll get into then come back and see me about this. But this is this is going to be a very passionate video. I learned a lot, and so we'll go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about down feathers and how that resource plays into both bedding and clothing, and how it can be environmentally friendly and ethically sustained. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Again, I was really jonesing to do this video. After the last video, I did some research about it, and it's just been rolling over in my head, and it's wonderful information. Several of the articles all of the resources that I used to source the information for this video is listed in the description box. And I wanted to look a little bit pretty for the video, so I did put on a little bit of makeup. I am wearing a 100% organic sweatshirt, so I wanted to kind of doll that up again, modern girl, eco girl in a modern world. So I do have a little bling here, but I just wanted to dress up my video a little bit. And this sweatshirt is available. I got it from Pact, P-A-C-T, and the link for that is down below, but it is 100% organic cotton, and it's super comfortable. But we're going to go ahead and get started. In the bedding video, we talked a lot about the way bedding is sourced, and also the way that jackets and bedding that use down, the way that it is sourced and the way that it goes into products. Now, to begin, down has been used for decades now. It's been around for a very long time. And basically, what prompted this video is that there's been a lot of popularity with down lately. Right now, there's been a resurgence of a lot of 80s fashion. And believe me, I was around when the 80s fashion first came into popularity. We had windbreakers, we had wild colors, and it's amazing, you know, that I've seen a few movies lately that really talk about that 80s fashion in a very, it's coming back in vogue, you know. So it's a little surprising. I remember the 80s, and you look back and you think, oh gosh, you know, not even 2 years ago that would have been really tacky, you know, kind of like, whoa, what? Wait, what? But it is coming back into fashion, especially the ski jackets. And the ski jackets utilize down feathers a whole lot, and that's something we wanted to talk about. Now, one other thing is that if you are a child of the 90s, or if you remember that decade, there was a fashion brand called Triple Fat Goose, and I mean, the name says it all, right? But that was also a big popular jacket. So we're going to go over all the details of that, you know, in this video. But basically, you know, down jackets have been around for a very long time. They're usually used for skiing jackets. They're very they keep you very warm. And honestly, in the last video, we talked a lot about what we call GSM, or grams per square meter. When you use down in bedding, like when you use it inside of a comforter, there are little pockets or little squares. And what that is that's called grams per square meter. And what that is any filling, if whatever insulating fiber, and that insulating fiber can be wool, it can be down feathers, or it can be another substance. And we're going to talk about that with this. There's down alternatives. But whatever substance is keeping you warm is packed into those lines of the jacket, or packed into the squares of your comforter or your duvet insert. And that is, there's a certain measure that keeps you kind of warmer because of the more fiber stuffed into that channel, or stuffed into that square. But with down, the way that down works is that it is the feathers of a bird. It's the feathers of a bird, which, of course, since the dawn of time has been insulating. It's insulating to the bird animal. And of course, if you stuff it into a jacket, stuff it into a lining of a bed, it's going to be insulating for humans. So, but what it does is that the way that it works is it's the birds, both geese and ducks, have kind of an inner feathers, and they have outer feathers. And what happens is there are two kind of common types of waterfowl that provide this. The most common type are goose feathers. And again, you saw that jacket that said triple fat goose. Goose feathers are bigger and fluffier, and they have kind of a stem to them, and they have a natural kind of plumage. Now, the other thing is that there's another type of duck that's called ender, I-N-D-E-R. Those have a more kind of insulating kind of, it's the inner feathers rather than the outer feathers that keep you the most warm. And what happens is when you have a mixture, and that's usually what a lot of these products entail, is that there's a mixture of goose feathers and duck feathers. But just to throw a few numbers out there, when the entire populace of the planet, when you purchase a goose down or a duck down jacket, that takes a lot of feathers to fill. And the type of feathers that fills is usually kind of a mix. Down feathers have, both goose feathers and down feathers have certain insulation properties, but one of the biggest factors of it is that when you have a mixture of the different type of feathers, they not only lay really well within the channels of the coat, or within the squares of the duvet, or whatever you're using it for, so it doesn't get as matted as some other fibers. But the other thing is that they kind of lock together, almost like they do on the waterfowl's body, almost they do on the bird's body. There's under feathers and there's outer feathers, and they kind of create this crisscross where like a grid of insulation. Now, the most common type of ducks are birds that provide this insulation. The most popular one is called an ender down, or I-N-D-E-R. And it is a duck. It's not a goose. It's a small kind of duck that has more kind of brownish feathers. And this is a very coveted animal for this source, for using it for its feathers. Eiderdown ducks actually nest with their feathers, and they actually, in their lifespan, when they nest, when they know that they're procreating young, when they're laying eggs, they will actually pluck out their own feathers. And so there's kind of 2 times a year that they naturally molt. They naturally, M-O-L-T, they naturally pull out their own feathers to create a nest. And that's when they're laying eggs and they want to create a nest. And it's actually, it's a little kind of eerie, sad, but some of these eiderdown birds, even when they're in the wild, even when they're not, grown for their feathers, they sometimes face starvation because they rather go hungry than to not produce enough to create their nests. So they're very mothering. These birds are very mothering, and that's kind of endearing the way that they are. Now, one thing with eiderdown birds is that there are ethically sourced, there's natural gathering processes of their feathers. Like you could just wait for them to molt and then just gather the feathers. But because that takes a longer amount of time, that usually, the other thing is they also pluck their own, like with their own beaks, they pluck their own under feathers. And it's the smaller under feathers that are a lot more insulating than the outer feathers. And that's when we get into like the plucking side of it. We'll talk about that again, but it's those under feathers that are more insulating, and that's what the bird naturally kind of sheds when they're nesting. But a naturally sourced enderbird, we could, there are companies that will just collect it naturally without affecting the animal at all. But of course, that takes longer amount of time. That always seems to be the contingent factor, is that when it takes longer amount of time, it's a more valuable resource because it takes longer to gather and then it becomes more expensive. Some naturally sourced eiderdown duvet covers can go for like $1,600, like $16,000. I'm sorry, close to $20,000. I know that's crazy. And some of the jackets can be like upwards of $6,000 for those that are naturally sourced. So those are some of the challenges that we got to talk about, because if you try to gather it naturally, it's going to be very expensive. Then, of course, there's other types of geese, but of course, a lot of manufacturers try to make it a mixture because the eiderdown plumage is a lot more insulating. It keeps you a lot warmer, and that's a more coveted type. But so there's definitely different types of different types of birds that provide this resource. Now, just to throw out some numbers. 90% of all of the world's, down comes from China, or comes from Asia and Europe, usually China. And believe it or not, in 1 year, the entire populace of the world will buy up to 270,000 metric tons of down. That's a lot of feathers. A lot of feathers. And of course, there's an Audubon link. There's a link to an Audubon article in the description box, which gave me a wealth of information for this video and in general. So please feel free to check that out. That's where I sourced a lot of this information. But what I thought was beautiful about that article is it gave me a lot of hope, because they actually talked about a man who went out to his local lake and said, okay, instead of trying to, harmfully extract these feathers from a bird, let me gather them. Let me see how long it takes me to gather them. And it's a beautiful story, and it's in the article, so please feel free to check it out. But he goes to the lake, and over the course of 1 month, he gathers about 3,000 feathers. So it's a lake that a lot of waterfowl frequent. So he's gathering different types of birds, geese, ducks, everything. But over the course of 1 month, he gathers about 3,000 feathers. On average, one of our puffy, trendy jackets that everybody's clamoring for takes about 8,000 feathers. So, and he gathered 3,000. But that's such a beautiful real world example of the difference between natural gathering and force plucking, force extracting, right? So it would take you 1 month to gather 3,000 feathers, and that's still roughly 3.4% of what you would need to create one of these trendy ski jackets. Right? And think about how many ski jackets are produced, right? So that makes up the 270,000 metric tons that is, being rolled out. So where is that coming from? That's what we need to talk about. Now, just trigger warning as we go forward, I'm not going to show a whole lot of graphic pictures, but there's one picture that's a little bit graphic, and I'll warn you before it. I showed it in the bedding video, so it's nothing scandalous, but so, but that Enderberg, at Eiderberg, Ider, Enderberg down. That down makes up about 75% of the jackets that are made. So that bird that naturally kind of sheds or nests really provides a majority of those smaller feather installational feathers, the down that goes into a lot of these jackets and goes to a lot of our bedding if we choose to go for that bedding. And again, towards the end of the video, we're going to get good. You know me with my video, guys. It is not all gloom and doom. By the end of the video, we're going to be talking about some positive alternatives, and we're going to be asking the questions, what can we do differently? Because that's boom, right? We can do things different. We can always do things different. Our buying dollar has a lot of power. But just to kind of go through a few numbers, what happens is up until about 2010, about 2008, 2013, and that's very recent. That kind of shocks me how recent it is. I mean, if you're watching this video now, it's 2021. We're talking about little more than 10 years ago that we started to get kind of, that ethical groups started to get in on this to say, okay, is this regulated? You know, and that is sad. That is sad. But what happens is those ender birds, the ones that naturally kind of molt, they molt 2 times a year, but they provide 75% of the total down, those smaller under feathers. It's not the outer feathers, it's the under feathers, right? That go into jackets and bedding. They are bred, and these are mostly females because those are the nesters, right? So, and they're also the ones that lay more eggs that will breed more females that will give you more product, right? But they are usually slaughtered at about 15 weeks. So a lot of these birds live anywhere from 10 to 15 weeks, you know, and when you think about that, gosh, you know, that's not even 3 months. But they're bred for that purpose, and they're bred to, you know, lay eggs, to molt. And now what happens is most females, some females, what happens is breeders tend to keep the females, and they can keep the females for as much as 5 years. The males might live about 10 weeks, but the females might live about 5 years. Now, the females naturally kind of molt about 2 times a year, but what happens is what triggered all this ethical kind of alarm bells was there about 13% of those 270,000 tons of feathers are sourced from live plucking. And I will just show a picture. So 3, 2, 1. It's very traumatic to the animal, and it's not natural. This is not the ender bird naturally plucking out its own feathers or shedding in order to create a nest. It's forced plucking in order to get to those under feathers, to get to those coveted smaller feathers that give you the most insulation, that are the most valuable product. And when an ender bird when an ender duck is let live for 5 years, normally they would molt naturally about two times a year, but if they're kept in harsh conditions, they are being forcefully plucked to get those feathers. And sometimes that 5-year span can be kind of like hell, because they can get plucked up to 16 times. And that whole time they're laying eggs in order to produce more females, and then the males are living about 10 weeks and then, you know, going to slaughter. Now, ducks also have kind of a harder life, because one other condition, in addition to plucking, is that feathers do not make up the entire income of a duck's productivity, or a goose's, really. It makes up about 5 to 10%. So 5 to 10% of the income comes from the plumage, comes from the down. The rest of it comes from the slaughter of the animal. And what it is that most ducks are force-fed what they call foie gras. It's something that forces their liver to engorge in order to sell the liver of the duck, because it's a bigger organ. It's like if you eat duck liver, or if you eat duck, it's a way to make the entire animal profitable. Now, please don't get upset because I know all of this is upsetting to hear, but those two types of ways of making money are the way that down is produced. And really up until 2001, it went unregulated. It went unregulated, and 13% of 270,000 tons of down. Because when you think about it, if you tried to organically source it, you're gathering 3,000 feathers over 1 month when it takes 8,000 feathers to produce one jacket. When is the fashion industry, when is the down industry ever going to feel like that's enough? It won't be. And especially when it's in vogue, it's popular. I actually went to the store recently, and actually my goal in posting this video is not to upset anyone, because we're going to get into alternatives. We're going to ask the reasons why, and this is going to get better. But, it is the day after Thanksgiving and you're out shopping. So we really want to talk about what you want to look for to make sure that you're making the ethical and environmental choice. So this is what has been going on until 2010. The first company to actually track down or to regulate down didn't come around until about 2008. So it is fairly new, but it is here, and it's been around for about 10 years. So let's go ahead and talk about the good. So with this, we know ducks and geese, they provide their feathers. The live plucking, that 13%, we want to avoid. That's the unethical way to gain that. If you're not vegan, that's fine. If you've eaten turkey on Thanksgiving, you're not vegan. So, but the ethical way to obtain these feathers is not to pluck the bird live. That's traumatic. If that bird was naturally raised for slaughter anyway, our goal is to make that a very happy life, however long that life is. Make sure that they're eating well and that they're free from harm. So this is the beautiful thing that I found about this, is that starting in 2008, there were about 3 companies, and actually it's more like 2. There's 3 companies, but one of them merged into a sub-company around 2015 that actually tracks and audits the way that these birds are raised. Just like animals can be grass-fed, just like you can certify whether or not your wool or anything else came from cruelty-free methods, you can check to make sure your down came from cruelty-free methods. And the first place is what we call NSF Global Traceable. And this actually gave me a lot of hope. I'm so glad that I read this article and did some research, because it's given me a lot of hope when it comes to the down market. When I did the bedding video, I was a little lost. But NSF Global Traceable Down, it started in 2013, and it talks about their purpose is hearing about the way that birds were live plucked, thinking about the way that, these birds were kind of forced to live in a inhospitable environment in order to produce, product. They created the 5 freedoms. And this is so beautiful. It's funny, years ago, actually, I think it was in 2008, I went up to New England, and I actually visited the art museum of, I visited the art museum of, oh gosh, what is it? Saturday Evening Post. I'll put the name up on the screen, but I'm drawing a blank. But he painted covers for the cover of Saturday Evening Post, and he actually had 5, I think it was 5 big paintings of the 5 freedoms. And I just think it's so beautiful that a company that cares about down production kind of emulated that for their purpose. But in 2013, the NSF Global Traceable Down Federation, or however you want to call it, created the 5 freedoms for ducks and geese. And the first freedom is freedom from hunger or thirst. So these ducks and geese must be fed, not force-fed, but fed, sustainable food, and must be watered. The second freedom is freedom from discomfort. They must, just like any other audit, They must be free from any discomfort. They can't be in crowded pens. They can't be treated inhospitably. Freedom. The third freedom is freedom from pain or injury, and also from disease. You know, they must be well cared for in their life, however short that may be. The fourth freedom is freedom to express normal and natural behavior. You know, this is a goose, this is a duck. They were born that way. Allow them to be a goose or a duck. You know, and the fifth freedom, which is really beautiful, is freedom from fear and distress. Norman Rockwell. Sorry, it took me a minute. Norman Rockwell. I went to the Norman Rockwell Museum years ago, and it was the most amazing experience. It was really liberating. And I walked into the museum, and the lady was so nice. The author, I'm sorry, quick transit. I'm very artistic, aside from being a humanitarian and an environmentalist. But Norman Rockwell's use of red was so beautiful, and I actually saw the painting of the trumpet playing boy in the recliner lounge. And after that, you know, the one of the ladies in the museum in New England, I think it was Massachusetts or Vermont. I think it was Massachusetts. But I walked into the museum and I said, "Please take me to the four freedoms. Take me into the freedoms room." And that was amazing. But I think of that. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but I think of that when I think about these five freedoms, and that it warms my heart to see that applied to animals. Because I'm not vegan, you know, I eat beef, I eat poultry, I eat chicken all the time. So I know that these animals go through this, but you know, it's something that you put in the back of your mind. You don't pull it to the forefront too much, especially not on Thanksgiving. And I don't mean to subject anyone to that, but my goal in this is just that in a minute, when you get to it, you know, if you're going out shopping, you know, pop those tags, look at what you're buying. And it's amazing how you can be environmentalist and still, you know, and still buy, you know, popular products. But the NSF Global Traceable Down Initiative from 2013 has those five freedoms, and that just was amazing to read. So, so freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain and injury or disease, freedom to express normal and natural behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. So these groups, any farms or any processing plants that collect down or grow ducks or geese for that purpose, they must be audited and they must adhere to those standards, and those standards are very high. And that's been around since 2013, which is a little crazy because that's less than 8 years, right? But I'm glad it's here. I'm glad it's here at last. It's here. Also, you know, what happened was the NSF Global Traceable Down turned into just NSF. And this was actually really pleasing. When I went shopping, I actually saw a lot of logos, and in a minute we'll look at those logos. But I saw NSF National. It became NSF National in 2015. So it's same group, same standards, same freedoms, just slightly different name, more conglomerate name. But they do audit, and they do have very high standards. So if you see that seal on something that's really high quality, that means that it is very vetted. Now, the second one is Responsible Down Standard. And what's beautiful is that this group, it not only adheres to the five freedoms as NSF, the same as NSF, but it also prevents any forced feeding. So that forced feeding, it's called foie gras. It's something that they force the ducks to eat in order to engorge their liver so they can sell the liver as a delicacy. And that's really kind of disturbing, but I mean, we're talking about live plucking too, so there's no limits here. But Responsible Down Standard is almost like a step up from NSF, because it not only says, okay, this duck has to have the five freedoms, but it can also it doesn't have any force feeding. There is nothing that is trying to enhance or change or forcibly alter the natural elements of that animal, and it prolongs the life and just contributes to the overall health. The last one is the it's called Down Pass. And this one has actually been around the longest. It's been around since 2018. And it adheres to the same principles. It doesn't explicitly adhere to the 5 freedoms, but it definitely talks about like, you know, no force feeding, and it also encourages traceability as to where you can look and see where that down came from. And actually that bridges really, really nicely into it. As I was shopping, I was curious. Again, after the last video, I kind of, and of course in my, you know, holiday shopping, and that's why I was posting the video at the time that I am. It's not to disturb anybody while they're eating, but we finish our good meal, we're grateful for our company, and then we go right out and shop, right? So when you go out and shop, go ahead and pop those tags. And I was really amazed at the tags that I saw. A lot of these companies, I will say that a lot of them adhere to these NSFs. You know, for instance, the North Face company and Patagonia, those adhere to not only NSF, but in a minute we're going to talk about down recycling. And Patagonia really encourages that as well. So there's definitely some ethical companies out there, and that's so nice. I'm really pleased with that. It eases my conscience a little bit. It helps me understand the process better. But when I went out, I did see that not only there are a lot of down jackets out there because they're in fashion, but they're popular, but there's little scanner bars that say NSF. So really, you want to look for those logos. You want to look for NSF. You want to look for RDS, Responsible Down Standard, and you want to look for Down Pass. So those are all the logos. But I did see a lot of RDS, which is really good. And in addition, so we talked about grams per square meter, like how much down is in that jacket. I saw several down jackets that are like 600, which is really warm. Because honestly, 400 would really keep you warm in comforter form. 600 would really be like if you're out skiing or if you're in the Arctic, right? I even saw a few 800. I saw on the tags, I saw a few things that said like 80-20. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. I'm not quite sure if that's like 80% duck down and then 20% goose down. That's how I kind of interpret it after all this education. But the other thing that's really great is that these companies, and I saw quite a few of them, LL Bean, I saw, what is it? The other one is, oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank? I'll put it up on the screen, but LL Bean, Patagonia, Althea, you know, Land's End. There we go, Land's End. Land's End's another really big one that really talks about, because these are all like New England, northern companies, and even if you're in other countries, it's about like, you know, really cold weather, ski weather kind of things. So and on their tags, on their sales tags, there's actually one of those squares that you can scan with your camera that it gives you the lot number and it completely traces the company that gave you your down. So you know for a fact that that down came not from live plucking. Now, just to throw it out there, if it didn't come from a live plucking, it still came from a dead duck or a dead goose. But that bird was bred for slaughter, and that bird lived a life that adhered to the 5 freedoms before it died. So at least you can take comfort in that. You know, there was no trauma, there was nothing done to that animal to make its life horrific while it was live. So if that gives you solace, you know, of course, if you're vegan and you want to avoid this completely, we're going to talk about some alternatives to that in a minute, but you can at least know that the company that provided that plumage is not the 13% of the world's, you know, down that does live plucking. Now, one way to get away from down, and the only way to really get away from down is to go with alternatives, and alternatives are tough. Alternatives are tough. If you watch the bedding video, I even said, you know, the alternative to down is any other natural fiber that is naturally insulating and will keep you warm. And in the top ranking of that it would be wool, either sheep's wool, merino wool, alpaca wool, or from a yak. Those would be the next highest insulating. But again, until we put our buying dollar toward it, it's not going to be as cost effective, and it's going to be a little bit more expensive. Now, it's funny, I did some research to try to find out, you know, are there companies that have coats that use wool? And the funny thing is I kept finding companies that use wool, but they keep blending it with something that's artificial. I keep seeing polyester or acrylic mixed in. And what amazes me, guys, this amazes me. Because the other thing is I've seen expensive, part of my French, I've seen expensive ass blankets that are like $100 and they're 100% acrylic. 100% acrylic, you can go to Walmart, you can go to any retailer and spend 30 bucks for a huge blanket that is 100% synthetic and that will not biodegrade. And if you want more details, check out my organic fabrics video or the bedding video. It doesn't biodegrade. It breaks off in our water supply every single time you wash that blanket, and it off gases, it leaks chemicals from the way that the material is made whenever it's synthetic. If it's 100% wool, if it's 100% silk, if it's 100% any organic fabric, it will biodegrade. It will last at least 70 to 100 years, which is your lifetime, which is how long we need it to last for, really. And then it'll keep you very well insulated and it will wash well. But just to use as an example, I do have a favorite sweater that I have not parted with, and I'll actually show a picture. It's wonderfully warm. It's beautifully made. The weave of it is gorgeous. It fits perfectly. And the irony is that it is 55% silk. This is probably why I love it. It's 55% silk. It's 15% wool. And the rest of it, that remaining 30%, is freaking acrylic. And tell me, guys, that burns my butt. To have a sweater that I love that much and to have it 30% of synthetic fiber that breaks off every time I wash it. And I don't wash it that often because it doesn't need to be washed as often because it's got a lot of wool in it. But, you know, I have another tank top that is a linen cotton blend, 100% linen cotton, and it is durable as all get out. The other thing is I went shopping recently and I saw this gorgeous coat, and it was not cheap. It was an expensive coat, and it had 7 different, no kidding, 7 different ways you could wear it. And it was 100% wool, except it had a polyester lining. Why in the world are we going to pay the same price for something that's not 100%? Why not line it with silk? If you're going to go big or go home. That's my grief. That's my gripe. And I'm sorry. I'm putting it on the internet with no shame. Because why not make that remaining 30% linen? Linen has long fibers. The other thing is, here we go. I'll even prove my point. This is a cloth that's 100% jute. And when I get into skincare and when I get into rugs and flooring, we're going to talk about more of the durable. Burlap, jute, hemp, you know, there's several more durable fibers, but jute is very soft against the skin. You can use it. And look at this. This is the back of it. I am pulling hard on this, guys. It's not going anywhere. Why in the world does my beautiful 55% silk, which is an expensive and valuable fiber, 15% wool, which is an expensive and valuable biodegradable fiber, why does it have to be mixed with acrylic? The short answer is it doesn't have to be. You could have made the remaining 30% jute. It would have been inexpensive. It would add to durability. It would wash just fine, and it would lay beautifully against the skin. So that's my rant. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing coats, and there's another article that talks about using wool as an alternative to down. But the problem is that wool is mixed with polyester. That wool is mixed with, it seems like it doesn't matter what we do, 70% of it is organic fabrics, 30% of it is synthetic fibers, and I have no idea why producers are doing that way. I don't know if they're just cutting out the extra dollar for that. Polyester's cheap, it's stronger, but when you cross fibers, you're still putting pollutants in the ground when that thing biodegrades. I want to see 100%. You know, again, go big or go home. But the other thing is, so there are coats out there that use fiber, but they're very hard to find. And a lot of times it's going to be that irritating 80% natural fibers mixture. And then that last 20–30% is going to be something synthetic. And whether that's polyester, whether that's nylon, whether that's, and granted, a lot of these ski jackets are covered in nylon anyway. And that's actually a good segue. The covering of the jacket is nylon, and a lot of times that is new nylon. And if you watch my organic fabrics video, we talk about nylon. It is a synthetic fabric. It is chemically based. It does leach chemicals into the water supply every time you wash it, and then it also leaks chemicals every time you throw it away. Now, the one benefit of nylon is that there are a lot of companies that recycle it. I saw one company that are taking old parachutes and turning them into like lounge chairs. So you can take old nylon, big spans of old nylon, and turn it into something new. The other thing is there's another company that take old billboards, like the heavy duty like nylon that's from billboards, and they turn it into bags, they turn it into backpacks. So it's not just getting thrown away or discarded. You can turn it into something new. So, and in a minute, we're going to talk about that. Now, one other alternative that a lot of companies are doing to down is they're trying to find synthetic fill. So it's not, so instead of using wool, instead of using down, they're saying, okay, let's use something completely different. But the problem is it's still synthetic. It's not a natural fiber. It's going to do all the nasty stuff. It's not going to biodegrade. It's going to leach chemicals, all that bad stuff. But at least, I understand where they're coming from. A lot of this technology originated in the late 70s, early 60s, early 80s, I'm sorry, late 70s, early 80s. So the first and foremost you hear about is thin slate. Thin slate has been around since the late 70s. It was created by 3M, and 3M, anytime you hear the big names like 3M, DuPont, those are the big chemical companies, so it's not surprising. But believe it or not, they are used, they do create an alternate down, so you don't pluck birds, you can use thin slate instead. Now, it is used by bigger companies like Carhartt, which is the company that produces a lot of the pants that a lot of construction workers, a lot of farmers use, the real durable insulated ones. And also Spidey, Spydey. Those companies do this. Now, one environmentally friendly thing about that is that Thin Slate has been trying to recycle bottles. Like they've been trying to use recycled plastic in their Thin Slate. But the problem is recycled plastic, you can only really use 70–80% of that anyway, and it doesn't biodegrade. So it's a good try though. I mean, definitely recycling, and these are some big names. Carhartt is a big one. That's used, that's worn by a lot of people. And if we can create, new clothing, new footwear using recycled material, then that's not in vain. Now, Polar Tech is another one. It's a synthetic fleece. It got created in 1981, but it's basically the same thing. Now, honestly, fleece is just brushed cotton. I really think we should stick with cotton because it biodegrades, but that is an alternative to down. The last one is a new one that you kind of hear of. It's called Prima Loft. And actually, it was developed by the U.S. Army, which is a little crazy. It's primarily used as a down alternative with LL Bean and Althea. But the only problem is it is polyester based, and polyester is bad. I mean, if you watch my organic fabric video, that talks a lot about that. Polyester is not a good one. It does all the same things, the other disadvantage is it's about 1/3 of the insulating properties. It's not as warm as regular down. But all alternatives here, the next alternative we can have is that, believe it or not, down feathers, once they're already plucked, can be recycled. They can be recycled. And honestly, nylon can be recycled too. We just talked about how nylon, parachutes or anything nylon can be recycled. We can take this old fabric and try to give it a new life because it's going to be around for a while. We might as well use it a few times, right? But there's actually something called re-down. And this is exciting for me, guys. This was half the reason I was so juiced up to do this video, is because I was like, yes, this is great. This is good news. But there's something called re-down, and what it is it's taking all the down feathers that have already been gathered. Maybe you have an old comforter, maybe you, an old duvet insert, maybe you have an old comforter that has down feathers in it. If you have an old ski jacket, those jackets from the 80s that have the bad lining that we don't like, that's not cool anymore, you can recycle them. And what it'll do is the process, and one of the articles that's posted below talks about this, you can actually wash and recycle the same feathers. The same feathers are good for a really long time. So even if they're 30 years old, if you clean them and use them again, they can be reused. So we don't have to pluck new birds to get the same, down. We can recycle that. And there is something called re-down. And there's a company called Nature Tex. I've never really heard of this. I haven't seen it too much, but I'm willing to check it out. And actually Patagonia, and this is another name that's been coming up. Patagonia came up with the NSF certification. It came up with the, tracing and the re-down. So if you are really interested in getting one of these jackets, I think Patagonia might be the company to go with. But Patagonia has actually even committed to using at least 80%, 80%, 4/5 of recycled down. So they're willing to clean the feathers, reuse the feathers to create new jackets. And that, gosh, guys, that's the way we want to go. I mean, again, I'm a hypocrite. I'm not vegan, but, to make it ethical, those 5 freedoms, to make it sustainable, to reuse materials that cannot biodegrade, to put them back into use, I feel like that's the way to go. And so doing this video is very exciting. It was exciting to learn about all this. I did not know any of this was out there. It's given me a lot of new hope. And one thing that I kind of want to ask you, I want to kind of throw it out there, is that have you seen recycled down in your marketplace? I mean, have you seen this out? Is this some kind of unicorn that really doesn't exist? Or have you seen it? Have you seen recycled nylon? Have you seen these jackets be repurposed in an environmentally friendly way? The other thing is that what natural resource do you think is better? Do you think that we should try to get away from down and really try to go to wool? Or should we just try to recycle the down or try to do it better? What do you think? Please, please tell me. I want to learn. I want to know what's the best thing to do, and I want to be in unison with others. The last thing that I wanted to kind of ask is that, do you feel like these hybrids of natural fibers and synthetic, is that necessary? Do you think that we could actually have a down jacket that's covered in natural wool that's completely biodegradable, 100%, no polyester, no nylon, none of this synthetic stuff that doesn't biodegrade? Is that possible, or are we just dreaming, But if you have answers to these questions, please let me know. That's the purpose of this channel. I want to learn from you. I want to know what you know. And also, please feel free to check out the links in the description box. All of the articles listed gave me a wealth of information about what to look for. And if you're so inclined, please post in the description box below, and I'd love to hear from you and see what can we do differently, what you think, and, what is possible. Because if we, what we think is possible is possible. It's out there, and I just always think it can be done. But last and not least, I hope that you have a wonderful holiday. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope that you have a great day sharing with people that you love, and grateful for all that's the abundance around you. And I do also hope that if you do partake in the holiday shopping, please pop those tags, look for what's ethical, and, let me know what you find. So, but I thank you so much for joining me today. I had a great time, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.